Welcome back to the deep dive, where we really try to take that fire hose of information and, turn it into something useful for you.
And today's mission is, well, it's a big one. It's pretty complex.
It really is. We are harmonizing one of the most action-packed and I would say controversial periods of Jesus's ministry. We're moving from his solitary, very confrontational work in Jerusalem
All the way to the massive mobilization of his mission team up in Galilee.
It's a huge shift in strategy.
It really is. It's the critical turning point where divine identity, which is revealed through these really explicit, almost shocking claims, leads directly to an unprecedented delegation of power.
And to do this, we're tracing the path using the lenses of all four gospel writers. So we've got Jesus as king from Matthew's perspective.
As servant in Mark, the ultimate man in Luke.
And of course, as eternal God in John. The goal is to get that complete 360-degree portrait.
Exactly.
Our sources for this are just huge today. We're starting with John 5, which is pure theological clash. Then we jump into Matthew 9 and this boast of messianic signs.
And from there, we harmonize the synoptic commissioning accounts. That's Matthew 10, Mark 6, and Luke 9. It's a massive block of text.
And we can't forget the essential coda, the debrief in Mark and Luke detailing the disciples' return. This whole deep dive is really about the movement from authority declared to authority delegated.
Precisely. And the tension, it starts immediately. You have this selfless act of healing, an act of pure compassion on a sacred day.
The Sabbath.
The Sabbath. And the religious authorities immediately view it not as a miracle, but as a capital offense. It sparks an immediate death plot. It's just incredibly dramatic.
Okay, so let's start there. Let's begin our journey in Jerusalem at the Pool of Bethesda. This isn't the quiet countryside of Galilee. This is the heart of Jewish orthodoxy.
Right. And John sets the scene so well. Jesus is in the capital for a feast, which means the religious climate is already heightened. The city is packed.
The setting itself is so crucial. The Pool of Bethesda near the Sheep Gate. What does the name mean?
The name literally means house of mercy. And it had these 5 covered porches or colonnades. And John tells us these were packed with a great multitude of the severely afflicted, the blind, the lame, the withered. It was a place of immense suffering.
A house of mercy, but it sounds more like a scene of competitive despair.
That's precisely the right way to put it. We have to get into the cultural and, I guess, the theological context of the pool itself.
Yeah.
There's a popular belief, and you see this in some textual variations of the manuscripts.
In verse 4, right?
Right, in verse 4. The belief was that an angel would occasionally come down and trouble the water, stir it up. And only the first person who got into the water after this agitation would be healed.
So this house of mercy actually created a system of absolute futility for the people who needed help the most.
Exactly. Think about it. The blind couldn't see the movement, the lame couldn't get to the edge in time, and the withered couldn't propel themselves into the water.
So it's not mercy at all.
No. It was a ritualistic lottery based on speed, on merit, on physical ability. It's a perfect symbol, kind of typological connection to the old covenant ritual, and even the law itself, ultimately unable to save those who are truly helpless. It was competitive, and it failed to dispense the free grace of God.
And that sets the stage perfectly for Jesus, who, from John's perspective as the eternal God, is about to bypass that entire system.
Completely. And the man he chooses to engage with has been in this condition for 38 years. That number is not random. It's historically loaded.
Right. 38 years. Why is that duration so significant?
Well, it's almost impossible not to connect it directly to Israel's 38 years of wandering and unbelief in the wilderness after the initial rebellion at Kadesh Barnea. You can see this in Deuteronomy chapter 2. So this man's affliction, his stagnation, it mirrored the nation's spiritual stagnation.
So by healing this specific man after this specific amount of time, Jesus is suggesting something bigger, a new beginning.
He's suggesting a thematic end to that long period of divine discipline and the failure under the law. It's a powerful statement.
And the psychological weight of that kind of suffering is it's staggering. After almost 4 decades, this man's entire identity is probably wrapped up in his disability and his constant failure to reach the water first.
Which is why Jesus' initial move is so incredibly insightful.
He initiates.
He does. As God, through John's lens, Jesus shows omniscience. He knows the man's long duration without even being told. He seeks out the secretless, the one who has given up.
And then he asks that profoundly disruptive question, do you wish to become well?
On the surface, it sounds absurd. Of course he wants to be well. Who wouldn't? But psychologically, Jesus is going so much deeper. He's confronting the man's learned helplessness, maybe even his complacency.
Because wellness means facing the terrifying unknown, right?
Yeah.
Responsibility, work, having to function outside the only social role he's known for 38 years, that of an invalid.
It forces him to confront his passive resignation. Has the desire for healing been replaced by the comfort of the familiar struggle?
And the man's reply really demonstrates that resignation. He doesn't look at Jesus and say, "Yes, I have faith, please heal me." He explains why the system has failed him.
Exactly. He says, "Sir, I have no man to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up. But while I am coming, another steps down before me." His hope is completely misplaced. It's in a ritual and in a social support system that he just doesn't have.
All his human solutions are exhausted.
This is the perfect moment for sovereign grace. Jesus, bypassing the pool, the superstition, the competition, just asserts his creative word power.
The threefold directive, it's so immediate.
Rise, take up your bed, and walk. And this is where we see the eternal God simply commanding creation to obey.
Let's break that down. Rise. That has powerful connotations, almost resurrection language. Walk demands immediate physical restoration. But why is take up your bed so vital?
That command is the beautiful allegory of the redeemed burden. The mat, or bed, was the physical, undeniable symbol of his long-term disability. It was the object that carried him and defined his status as an invalid for nearly 4 decades.
So by making him carry the mat,
Jesus converts that symbol of stagnation and disability into an undeniable, visible testimony of his freedom. What once carried him, he now carries. It's a complete reversal of his identity.
and physiologically, the healing is instantaneous. 38 years of muscle atrophy, lost balance, lost coordination, all of it is immediately restored by a single command. It proves the restoration is total.
Absolutely. It wasn't a slow recovery. It was a creative act of physical and spiritual engineering. But here's the friction point. The healing took place and the man carried his mat right on the Sabbath.
And that's the sudden, jarring shift that moves this story from a miracle to a full-blown crisis.
If the miracle itself wasn't enough to stir controversy, it was the specific timing right on the Sabbath and the carrying of that burden that turned it into a crisis. The religious establishment, who John refers to as the Jews in this context, immediately attacks the act of carrying the bed.
Because this was defined as forbidden labor under their rules?
Under the stringent Mishnah regulations, yes.
Can you just clarify those regulations for us? What exactly are we talking about here?
Certainly. The law of Moses in the Old Testament commanded rest on the Sabbath. It was a core principle. But over centuries, various Jewish traditions, what's called the oral law, later written down in the Mishnah, created what they saw as a fence around the law to prevent any accidental violation.
So extra rules to protect the main rules?
Precisely. And one of these very specific regulations strictly prohibited carrying any burden, including something like a mat or a bed, outside of one's private dwelling. So the leaders prioritized these man-made additions to the law over a divine act of compassion and life-giving.
They saw a man who had been an invalid for 38 years walking, and they ignored the miracle completely, focusing only on the infraction of him carrying his mat. Their priority was the rule, not the mercy.
It reveals a massive spiritual hardening and a profound failure of love. The healed man, he defends himself by appealing to the higher authority of his healer. He says, "He who made me whole, that one said to me, 'Take up your bed and walk.'"
He recognizes that the one who can create life must also have the authority to dictate the rules for living that life. It's a logical defense.
It is. But the religious leaders, they don't ask, "Where is this wonderful healer so we can praise him?" They ask, "Who is the man who said this to you?" They are hunting for the lawbreaker, not the life giver.
Jesus withdraws for a moment, but he finds the man later. And significantly, he finds him in the temple.
Which shows Jesus' pastoral follow-up. So important. He sought him out at the pool to heal him, and he seeks him out again after the healing to instruct him.
And the instruction he gives in the temple is fascinating. He connects the physical healing to spiritual accountability. He says, "Behold, you have become well. Sin no more, lest something worse may happen to you."
This is a complex verse. It does suggest a possible link between the man's past affliction and his lifestyle, but more importantly, it stresses future accountability. The healing isn't just physical, it mandates a lifestyle change.
And what about that warning, lest something worse may happen? Is that a threat of physical relapse?
Not necessarily. It could be, but it's more likely an allusion to eternal consequences, or maybe the spiritual danger of a heart made clean but then left empty. Jesus warned about that elsewhere, how an evil spirit can return with 7 others to a house that's been swept clean but left unoccupied.
So the man, whether he's being innocent or maybe just motivated by fear of the authorities, goes and reports back that it was Jesus who healed him. And this testimony is what precipitates the death plot.
This is the catalyst. They sought to kill him because of 2 linked claims. First, he broke their Sabbath rules. And second, in defense of that action, Jesus made his most explicit claim to divinity up to this point in John's Gospel.
My Father is working until now, and I am working.
That statement is the ultimate theological bomb dropped right into the middle of this legalistic establishment.
It's a definitive declaration of Jesus as the eternal God.
Absolutely. He's claiming an equal, continuous working relationship with the Father. The Jewish leaders believe that while God rested from the work of creation on the 7th day, his continuous work of sustaining creation and judging humanity never ceased. So Jesus is claiming that if the Father's continuous providence and redemptive work never stops, then neither does the Son's work.
And the Jewish leaders, they get it instantly. There's no confusion.
None at all. They understand this as a claim of making himself equal with God, which to them is the definition of blasphemy, punishable by death. The healing was the spark. This claim of divine equality was the fuel that set the ongoing death plot ablaze.
So Jesus' response isn't to retract or apologize. It's to launch into this great discourse, fully unpacking his authority in verses 19 all the way through 30.
He begins with this profound paradox of the Son's unity. He says the Son can do nothing of his own accord total dependence. But then, in the same breath, he says, whatever the Father does, the Son does likewise. Total equality.
It sounds contradictory. How do we synthesize that? Total submission, yet total equality.
It speaks to the equality of nature, their shared divine essence, while also demonstrating perfect functional submission within the roles of the Trinity. The Son submits to the Father's will. There's no separation in purpose, will, or power because their relationship is rooted in divine love. The Father, he says, shows the Son everything he does.
And because of this perfect unity, Jesus stakes his claim to the 2 ultimate divine prerogatives. First, the authority to give life.
Right. For as the Father raises the dead and makes them alive, so also the Son makes alive whom he wills. This is talking about both present spiritual life resurrection from spiritual death and the future physical resurrection.
And second, the authority to execute all judgment.
For neither does the Father judge anyone, but all judgment he is given to the Son. This aligns perfectly with Matthew's perspective, that king focus, highlighting the royal prerogative of the Anointed One.
And he gives a reason for this delegation.
Yes, and it's critical that all may honor the Son, just as they honor the Father. He's saying you can't separate them. If you refuse to give the Son the honor due to God, you are, by definition, refusing to honor the Father who sent him.
The discourse then shifts a bit to clarify what some academics call realized eschatology. That's a term we should probably define simply for everyone listening.
In simple terms, eschatology is the study of the end times judgment, resurrection, the final state of things. Realized eschatology means that some of the benefits of the end times are available now, in the present.
They've been realized in the present.
Exactly. And verse 24 is the confirmation of this. Jesus says, "He who hears my word and believes him who sent me has life during this age, and has passed out of death to life."
So, for the believer, eternal life isn't just a future hope, it's a present possession. Spiritual judgment is already escaped.
Precisely. But then, just a moment later, Jesus points to the future, universal resurrection, which confirms prophecies like Daniel 12:2. He says, "The hour is coming in which all those in the tombs will hear his voice, and they will come out."
Both the righteous and the wicked.
Both. Those who did good things to a resurrection of life, and those who practiced evil things to a resurrection of judgment. His authority extends over the entire realm of the dead. It's a massive claim.
And he links this authority to his identity as the Son of Man, another title from Daniel.
Right. He says judgment is given to him because he is the Son of Man. His authority as judge is secured through his perfect obedience as the ultimate human representative.
Now, in the final part of this discourse, Jesus moves on to the chain of witnesses. He recognizes the Jewish legal requirement for testimony, but shows that the required witnesses already exist.
He essentially puts his case on trial and calls 4 key witnesses. First, John the Baptist. He calls John a burning and shining lamp, but he was a temporary witness. John's purpose was fulfilled. Jesus is making it clear that his ultimate credibility doesn't rely on any human validation, not even from someone as great as John.
So witness number 2.
His works, the miracles themselves, the healing of the man at Bethesda, The blind men we're about to discuss. He says, "The works that the Father gave me, they themselves testify concerning me that the Father has sent me." These miracles are undeniable external divine evidence. They're superior to any human word.
Witness 3 is the Father himself.
Yes, the Father has testified. This witness is both internal and external, like the voice at his baptism. But here, Jesus diagnoses the leader's fundamental spiritual failure. He tells them, "You have neither heard his voice at any time, nor have you seen his appearance."
So they lack the spiritual perception and the moral capacity to receive this divine witness.
Exactly, because, as he says, they have not allowed God's word to abide in them.
And this brings us to the devastating fourth witness, the scriptures they claim to uphold. This is the ultimate indictment of their religious ritualism over actual relationship.
This is the tragic climax of the whole confrontation. He says, "You search the scriptures because you believe in them, you have eternal life. And these are they that testify concerning me. And you will not come to me that you may have life."
They worship the text.
They worship the text. They believed eternal life was contained in the academic exercise of reading and debating the scrolls, but they refused to submit to the person the entire text was pointing to.
So the barrier to belief wasn't a lack of information, it was a lack of submission, and as Jesus says, a lack of love. He really drills down on this psychological barrier.
Absolutely. He identifies two key flaws that are so relevant for us. First, he says they do not have the love of God in themselves, and second, they prefer glory from one another over the glory that comes from God alone.
That search for human approval, social status, peer affirmation within their religious hierarchy was the defining psychological barrier preventing them from accepting Jesus.
It's so deeply relevant today. The pressure of social conformity, whether it's in a religious setting or in the wider culture, so often overrides the pursuit of truth or genuine faith. They preferred the praise of the Sanhedrin to the praise of the living God.
And finally, the great irony. Moses, their foundational authority, becomes their prosecutor.
It's the final twist of the knife. He says, "Do not think that I will accuse you to the Father. There is one who is accusing you, Moses, in whom you have hoped."
Because Moses wrote about Jesus.
The entire law, the whole Pentateuch, has a Christological thrust. Rejecting Christ means rejecting the very law and the very prophet they claim to follow. And the ultimate irony is that they're standing there plotting his murder, a direct violation of the law, all while claiming to be upholding that same law. It's a perfect, tragic circle of self-deception.
Okay, so after that incredibly intense clash in the capital, we're going to shift back to Matthew. The focus moves to Galilee, and Jesus is really consolidating his credentials as the promised king.
Right. And Matthew groups these next rapid-fire miracles together as undeniable messianic signs. He's fulfilling prophecy and demonstrating authority, building the case for Jesus as king.
Matthew's royal lens demands proof that Jesus is the Davidic heir, and Isaiah the prophet laid out the exact signs that the Messiah would perform.
So by recording these next two miracles back to back, Matthew is just showing Jesus stacking up those credentials, checking off the boxes of messianic prophecy.
Let's look at the healing of the two blind men first. Starting in Matthew 9, verse 27, they're persistently following him, and they're shouting this crucial title.
"Deal kindly with us, Son of David."
And that phrase, Son of David, is just so highly charged.
Oh, it's not just a polite address. It is an explicit, public, and frankly, political confession of Jesus' royalty. It ties him directly to the Davidic covenant from 2 Samuel 7. It's a declaration that he is the promised king.
And the irony, again, is just so powerful. The physically blind men have a spiritual sight that the religious leaders in Jerusalem who could see perfectly well completely lacked.
Exactly. And Jesus tests them. He leads them into a house, maybe to create a private space away from the crowds, for this crucial interaction. And he asks them, "Do you believe that I am able to do this?"
The king doesn't just dispense power arbitrarily. He requires this faith-activated relationship.
Right. The healing is relational. It's tied directly to their affirmation, "Yes, Lord." And Jesus' response is the instrumental cause of the healing. "According to your faith, let it be done to you." Faith opens the channel for the king's power to flow.
And their sight is instantly restored. This is a direct fulfillment of Isaiah 35:5. Then the eyes of the blind shall be opened.
And the ears of the deaf shall be unstopped. Yes, this is the king providing the promised physical transformation of the Messianic age. But then we run headlong into this thing called the messianic secret.
Which is a major dynamic, especially in Mark, but Matthew captures it so powerfully here. Jesus strictly charged them, saying, "See, let no one know."
And that seems so counterintuitive, right? Why the secrecy? His whole mission is to proclaim the kingdom. Why would he command them to be quiet about this?
It seems like you'd want to publicize this kind of miracle.
You would think so. But you have to remember the historical context. The people are under Roman occupation. They hold these fiercely political expectations for the Messiah. They see a king, and they expect immediate military deliverance.
So if news of a man performing these miracles and being hailed as the son of David spread unchecked,
it could trigger two disastrous things. First, a premature, misguided political uprising against Rome, which would be violently crushed and completely sabotage the spiritual mission. And second, the political expectation would overshadow the absolute necessity of the cross the servant's path to the throne.
So the secrecy was strategic. It was designed to manage expectations and ensure the narrative focused on spiritual transformation, not just physical liberation from Rome.
Precisely. It was a tactical measure by the king to control the timing and the method of the kingdom's establishment. But the healed men, they're just overwhelmed by gratitude and zeal.
And they immediately disobey. They go and spread his fame everywhere.
Which just speaks to that tension in ministry, doesn't it? Human zeal, even when it's born of genuine gratitude, often outpaces divine instruction.
And their well-intentioned disobedience probably forced Jesus to manage even larger, more insistent crowds, which only ramped up the pressure from both the populace and the authorities.
Without a doubt. And this leads right into the next event, the healing of the dumb demoniac. This is an even starker confrontation with spiritual darkness.
Matthew 9, verse 32. A man is brought to him, and his muteness is not physical. It's directly caused by demon possession.
Which highlights a key tactic in spiritual warfare. Satan seeks to silence testimony and communication. The goal is to prevent the created being from giving praise and witness to God. It's a strategy of silencing. Notice the man is completely dependent on others to even bring him to Christ.
And Jesus demonstrates this absolute, unprecedented authority. He just casts the demon out and the mute man speaks. The crowd's reaction is pure astonishment. They say, "Never was anything like this seen in Israel."
This is definitive proof that the kingdom has arrived. The prophecy of Isaiah 35.6, the tongue of the mute sing for joy, is fulfilled right before their eyes. Jesus is demonstrating that the strong man, Satan, is being bound, and his authority exceeds any previous prophet or exorcist tradition found in Israel. It confirms the king's dominion over the entire spiritual realm.
But the Pharisees, the spiritually hardened leaders who had followed him north from Jerusalem, they can't accept this. They are presented with undeniable evidence, but they invent this blasphemous counter-narrative.
This is the Beelzebul accusation, and it's really the apex of their spiritual hardening. They say, he casts out the demons by the ruler of the demons, Beelzebul.
They can't deny the miracle took place, so they have to attack the source of the power. They attribute God's work to Satan himself. They look at light and call it darkness.
That is the ultimate theological dynamic, isn't it? You have the exact same evidence, the miracle leading to diametrically opposite conclusions. You have astonishment and wonder from the crowd, and you have hostile rejection and accusation from the religious elite.
It just proves that your presuppositions, what you've pre-decided is true about Jesus, determine how you interpret the evidence.
Exactly. They had already decided Jesus could not be the Messiah because he violated their traditions. Therefore, his power must be derived from evil. This marks their crossing into the territory of attributing the clear work of the Holy Spirit to evil, which Jesus later warns is an incredibly dangerous, unforgivable place to be. The war is fought entirely over the source of the king's authority.
Okay, so now we come to the pivot point. Jesus has definitively established his identity, both through theological confrontation in John 5 and these messianic signs in Matthew 9. So the natural next step for a king is to commission ambassadors.
This is the moment the mission moves from singular to multiplied. It's a monumental shift. Jesus transforms these observers into active participants. He calls the 12, a number that's symbolic of the restored new Israel, and formally designates them as apostles, which means sent ones.
The king is giving his marching orders, and the authority he grants them is really the key here. Luke emphasizes that he gave them both power, or dynamis, and authority, exousia. What's the distinction we should draw there?
It's a really important one. Dynamis is the raw, inherent power, the ability to do the miraculous, that explosive strength. But exousia is the legal right, the authority, the permission to use that power.
So it's like having a powerful weapon, the dynamis, but you also need the badge, the exousia, that gives you the right to use it.
That's a great way to put it. Jesus the King is delegating both the legal right and the raw strength to confront the realm of darkness, essentially replicating his own ministry through them.
And this authority is delegated, it's not their own.
No, it derives entirely from him, from the source, and it covers all unclean spirits, diseases, and sickness. This is a royal authorization for a special task force.
Mark, with his lens of Jesus the servant, adds that practical detail that he sent them out 2 by 2.
Yeah.
Why is that significant?
Mark always emphasizes active, urgent ministry. Sending them in pairs models mutual support, accountability, and safety in what could be a hostile environment.
Yeah.
And it also fulfills the Jewish legal requirement of needing a dual witness from Deuteronomy to validate their message.
The mandate they're given is twofold. There's the message, and then there's the authentication of the message.
The message is simple. It's the same as Jesus's. The kingdom of heaven is at hand, and the authentication is the action. Heal the sick, cleanse the lepers, raise the dead, cast out demons. Matthew, the royal chronicler, lists the mandate comprehensively, and it includes the jaw-dropping authority to raise the dead.
So the servant is multiplying his service through them.
Exactly. But before they even leave, Jesus sets this economic principle for all kingdom work, and it runs completely counter to the commercial spirit of the world.
You have received freely, freely give.
This establishes the principle of grace in ministry. No commercialization, no selling of the gospel or spiritual gifts. And to enforce this radical principle of grace and dependence, Jesus gives these astonishing instructions to travel light.
The instructions are so specific and, frankly, impractical by worldly standards. No gold, no silver, no copper, no bag for the road, no bread, not even a second tunic. It's radical simplicity.
This is the ultimate man, through Luke's lens, instructing his followers on what absolute trust in God looks like. They were required to practice immediate, absolute reliance on divine provision through the hospitality of the people they were ministering to.
And there's a slight difference between the Gospels on this, right, with the staff?
There is. Mark allows the staff they already possessed and the sandals they were already wearing. This probably emphasizes urgent, simple mobility over a strict, burdensome prohibition. The goal wasn't to make it hard. The goal was simplicity and urgency.
But sending them out as sheep in the midst of wolves, a phrase he uses, without basic provisions for protection or survival seems incredibly risky.
That's the whole point. Jesus intended the risk. He knew the potential hostility. But the mission's success was never meant to rely on their material preparedness or their self-sufficiency. It was meant to rely solely on the power and authority they were delegated.
And the assurance is theological. The worker is worthy of his support.
Right. If God sends you, God provides the means, often through the local community. This radical dependence was a testimony in itself. It engaged the local hospitality culture and demanded that these missionaries depend entirely on the people whose spiritual lives they were serving.
Okay, so once they arrive in a town, what's the protocol? They can't just bounce from house to house looking for the best meal.
No, the protocol emphasizes stability and loyalty. They are to seek out who is worthy, someone receptive to the message, and remain in that one house. This prevented them from causing offense by constantly seeking better accommodations, and it modeled humility and focused attention.
And the response to rejection is equally serious and highly symbolic, shaking off the dust from their feet.
If the king's ambassadors are not received, they are to shake off even the dust from the soles of your feet as a testimony against them. Culturally, this was a practice Jewish people used when leaving Gentile territory. It symbolized separation from pagan impurity.
So by using this gesture against Jewish cities, they're making a powerful statement.
A huge one. Rejecting the king's messengers, who came with divine power and authority, was an act that treated those rejectors as spiritually separated, like Gentiles. It establishes their accountability. It's a prophetic warning, not a vindictive curse.
And the gravity of that rejection is underscored by that final warning in Matthew 10.51. It will be more tolerable for the land of Sodom and Gomorrah in the day of judgment than for that city.
This is the king's judicial authority speaking. It links right back to the judgment theme in John 5. Greater privilege receiving the direct emissaries of the Messiah himself brings greater catastrophic responsibility. The rejection of the apostolic witness is deemed worse than the historical wickedness of Sodom because they rejected the light that was offered and authenticated by miracles.
And finally, the instruction for spiritual wisdom. Behold, I send you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. That is just a brutal description of the mission field.
It's a stark warning of inevitable danger and opposition. But the instruction for survival is brilliant. Be wise as the serpent and innocent as the doves.
That is the perfect blend of street smarts and spiritual purity.
It is. They must be spiritually savvy, recognizing the cunning and the hidden dangers of the opposition, the wolves, the serpents, but they must remain harmlessly pure, guileless, and free from malice or corruption, like doves. The ultimate man is instructing his followers on the resilience and integrity required for sustainable service, especially in hostile territory.
So the mission was a success. They went out, they preached repentance, they cast out many demons, and they healed the sick. But ministry, especially ministry of that magnitude, must take an enormous physical and spiritual toll. And now we see this critical need for rest.
Mark, in his focus on Jesus the servant, and Luke, focusing on the ultimate man, they really highlight the practical reality of ministry fatigue. The apostles, having completed their mission, they return and gather with Jesus for a full debriefing. They report all that they had done and taught.
And this accountability model is so important. It's not just reporting successes, it's processing the spiritual and the emotional experience under the mentorship of Christ. They need to understand what happened, why it worked, and deal with the psychological weight of confronting darkness.
Absolutely. Just think about the spiritual battles they fought, casting out demons, facing rejection from entire towns, dealing with immense crowds. This level of spiritual warfare requires processing. If they don't debrief, they are so likely to burn out or become spiritually arrogant.
So Jesus ensures they're tethered back to the source of their delegated authority.
Yes, and Mark's sermon compassion immediately recognizes their exhaustion. The demands have been absolutely relentless. Mark notes they had no leisure even to eat.
And Jesus, as the ultimate servant leader, models a divine requirement. Come away by yourselves to a secluded place and rest a while.
This is such a crucial lesson. Rest and retreat are not optional luxuries. They're not signs of failure. They were divine requirements for sustainable service.
In our modern culture of, perpetual connectivity and hustle, that sounds like a radical command.
It is. Ministry success often leads to intensified demands and inevitable fatigue. So Jesus strategically withdrew them to a deserted place, specifically near the town of Bethesda, for private time. This withdrawal was a necessary step for spiritual refueling, for physical recovery, and for mentorship before the next, even more demanding phase of ministry.
Which was the feeding of the 5,000.
Exactly. The message is just so clear. Even when you are operating under delegated divine authority, the human vessel needs retreat and renewal. Without that time with the master, the power, the dynamis they were given is quickly depleted by the demands of the mission.
Okay, let's pull all these threads together now. We've seen Jesus move from confronting the entire Jewish system of legalism and superstition in Jerusalem to commissioning this rapid deployment force in Galilee. What does this complete harmonized sequence reveal about the king, the servant, the ultimate man, and the eternal God?
It reveals a total coherence of prophecy and action. The signs we reviewed, healing the blind, the lame man, the mute demoniac, they all confirm him as the Messiah, fulfilling Isaiah 35:5-6.
Yeah.
John 5 situates him within Danielic eschatology as the Son of Man who is the ultimate judge. And the commissioning itself fulfills prophetic promises of shared leadership and the ingathering of Israel.
And we witnessed these spiritual battles that were fought over two things, his identity and the source of his power.
Yes. The opposition, whether of the death plot at Bethesda or the Beelzebul accusation to Matthew 9, it always sought to either stop the works or delegitimize the source. And the healing of the mute demoniac is an essential behind-the-scenes victory. It's a direct reversal of the demonic strategy to silence praise and witness. The victory of deliverance is fundamentally a war for proclamation, restoring the human voice for testimony.
Let's delve a little deeper into the typological and allegorical elements, specifically starting with the Pool of Bethesda.
The pool is such a powerful allegory for all systems of human merit or religious ritual. It was ritualistic, competitive, and ultimately powerless to save the truly afflicted. It's a type of the Old Covenant law which, because of human weakness, failed to deliver ultimate salvation. And Jesus, as the eternal God and the source of grace, just bypassed that entire futile system.
Demonstrating that life comes from his direct command, not from striving in troubled water.
Exactly.
And what about the man carrying his mat? We touched on this, but it bears repeating in the context of our personal identity.
That mat is the metaphor of the redeemed burden. We all have a mat, a history of affliction, of failure, an identity that was defined by weakness. When Christ heals us, we are commanded to take up that former burden and carry it as a testimony. It no longer holds us down or defines us. It becomes a powerful, visible symbol of the freedom he provided.
And similarly, the healing of blindness moves from spiritual darkness to spiritual enlightenment.
From ignorance of the Messiah to that explicit recognition, Son of David.
So let's make this information actionable. Where does this historical theological deep dive impact us today as modern believers?
Well, it impacts us profoundly on every level, individual, social, and cultural.
Let's start with the individual call to action, echoing that man at the pool.
Individually, we have to choose obedience over passive waiting. We have to prioritize Christ's direct word, rise, take up your mat, over religious tradition or our own complacency. The futility of just waiting by the pool. We are called to faith-activated obedience, not resigned helplessness.
And that warning against seeking glory from one another from John 5:44, that remains a massive psychological trap today.
It is perhaps more relevant than ever in our age of constant performance and social media. Jesus' warning cautions against prioritizing status, likes, popularity, or social approval, whether it's inside the church or outside of it, over seeking the authentic, humble glory that comes from God alone.
This focus on human approval is still a core barrier to true sacrificial discipleship.
It is. We are constantly tempted to substitute performance for true devotion.
And the challenge to legalism seen in that Sabbath controversy also provides a cultural framework for us.
Absolutely. By intentionally breaking the man-made traditions of the Sabbath, but not the divine principle of the Sabbath, which is important. Jesus models a ministry that prioritizes human dignity, life, and radical mercy over rigid, unnecessary rules. This gives us a clear framework to advocate for justice and compassion in our modern society. Rules must serve life, not the other way around.
And we are also still commissioned. We're still the King's ambassadors.
We are. We are operating under the delegated exousia of the King, just as the 12 were. We have to embody that freely received, freely give principle, ensuring our spiritual service is rooted in grace, not in commerce. If the King gave unpolished, imperfect men authority over all demons and diseases, then our understanding of what the King empowers us to do today needs to be radically redefined.
And finally, that essential lesson from Mark 6 and Luke 9, the rhythm of rest.
This is just critical for the family, for the individual, and for the church in a culture that is defined by burnout. Jesus modeled and commanded rest, not as a weakness, but as a divine necessity for sustainable ministry. Without intentional retreat, debriefing, and physical restoration, the spiritual and emotional engine just breaks down.
The command to rest a while is a protective measure against exhaustion and cynicism.
It is. It ensures that the power we draw upon is His, not ours. It confirms that the human vessel has limits, even when operating with divine authority.
This harmonized narrative is just so powerful because it starts with singular divine authority, the eternal God confronting the entire religious system in John 5. And it culminates in the courageous act of delegating that dominion and power to 12 ordinary men. The King's dominion is meant to be multiplied.
It moves the focus from what Jesus can do to what we, as His empowered representatives, are authorized to do. The initial commissioning in Matthew 10, that was limited. It was to Israel, geographically confined, temporary.
But the power granted over all sickness, disease, and demons was absolute.
And that leads directly to His Great Commission in Matthew 28, where all those limitations are removed. The mission becomes worldwide, it becomes permanent, and it's secured by His eternal authority when He says, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore."
So if the King delegated such radical, unprecedented power to that original, imperfect, and sometimes competitive team, who are still prone to arguing over who was the greatest, what authority has the King and God delegated to you, His empowered ambassador, today?
The question isn't about the availability of the power. The sources assure us it's been delegated. The question is whether we are willing to embrace the radical obedience of rise, take up your mat, the radical dependence of traveling light, and the necessary spiritual wisdom of being wise as serpents and innocent as doves to participate in a kingdom that is still, right now, at hand. That's the challenge.
A compelling challenge and a truth well worth processing. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the harmonized work of Christ.
We appreciate you diving in with us.
We'll see you next time.